was 1906. A group of Christians came together, and really interesting when you look at it, kind of the group that first created the trust. There's bankers, there's entrepreneurs, there's kind of industrial chemists, all sorts. There's even an evangelist on that first kind of documentation, all signing up to create the trust.
Brilliant. Well, hello and welcome to the Church Office podcast. My name is Gavin Smith, and it's a joy to welcome you today to our admin and operations podcast. We love talking about the busy work and life that happens behind the scenes. And we've got a special guest on today, Daniel Jones. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Hey, Gavin. Good to see you.
It's great to have him on. And Daniel is you're the Chief Purpose Officer for Stewardship. Now, that takes a little bit of explaining. That's a fancy, cool title.
Yeah, fancy and cool is one way to look at it. So prior to that, I was Chief Generosity Officer at Stewardship. So now I'm Chief Purpose Officer. So it's a fun role. It gives me the opportunity to do work externally, taking kind of stewardship's purpose out into the world. But also I have the great privilege and responsibility of looking after our staff team of 115 as well. And so I like to think of it, how do we help our purpose as an organization come to life in the lives of those that choose to work for us as well. So so it's fun, and it's a fun role.
Oh, I love that. Super good. And so the Church Office and Stewardship of sort of partnering together, and you guys are sponsoring some of the episodes of our podcast this year, and we're grateful for any funds that we get, really, to keep the Church Office going in whatever way we can. So it's a joy to do that. So we thought, let's kick off the podcast and talk about stewardship and what you guys are involved in. So mate, how long have you tell us a little bit about yourself and the church you go to and how you ended up at Stewardship? Sure. Give us a bit of that kind of history.
So there's a whole potted history. If I start with how I got to Stewardship, I've been at Stewardship for 18 years.
Okay.
So prior to that, I was in my early 20s, and some friends and I had started to work together on a charity project supporting a number of churches operating in Kenya. And so I'd been doing that full time for a couple of years out of university, and then an opportunity arose for me to join the team at Stewardship. So that was 18 years ago. Wow. And I've been here ever since, and it's been kind of fantastic to kind of be part of the journey of Stewardship over the last 18 years. And I suppose in that time, learn a lot about what Stewardship does, learn a lot about the history of Stewardship as well. And what I found when I started to understand more of the history of Stewardship was that actually my church upbringing had a lot to thank Stewardship for. So I hadn't realized, but Stewardship way back, kind of almost 100 years ago now, had been quite central to supporting the church that my great-grandparents worked together to help plant, and that needed some extra support. And so the trust that has now become Stewardship at the time was involved way back then. So unbeknownst to me, I was born and raised in a church that had been helped and supported by Stewardship. That was an independent church. I've gone through various churches along the way, but I now call St. Michael's in Braintree home, which is a large evangelical Anglican church in the middle of town. So that's church for me now.
Superb. Now, on a random fact, I used to play for Braintree Town in the football club. Yeah.
Is that right? Well, I now must confess, I don't think I've ever gone to watch Braintree Town. I did see on Facebook that there's a new mascot. That's been added recently. So that's clearly that wasn't you, Gavin. That's someone else. So.
Random link. We're probably talking about 27, 28 years ago. So when they were in the Conference League. So Braintree Town. There we are.
I'm honoured to be in your presence. All the more, Gavin.
All the more. I love that. So Stewardship has been around for 100+ years. Then you're making reference to that in terms of the previous trust.
So we actually trace our history now back. This is our 120th year of operation as an organization. Way back, it was 1906. A group of Christians came together, and really interesting when you look at it, kind of the group that first created the trust. There's bankers, there's entrepreneurs, there's kind of industrial chemists, all sorts. There's even an evangelist on that first kind of documentation, all signing up to create the trust. And the trust from its inception was created to help resource the church and resource evangelization,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
In 1906, this group of quite, I suspect, kind of learned and entrepreneurially minded Christians gathered, and they said, well, actually, we need to put this in something. We need to create a trust.
Yeah.
So at that time, they were wrestling with property issues.
Okay.
There was lots of work happening around the country, lots of evangelistic work. There was a growth of kind of more of the independent church at that time,
Yeah.
which was creating lots of new congregations. Lots of people really fired up by their faith, but actually lacking a lot of the administrative and governance
Yeah.
capability to say, well, how do we organize and run this? And so the idea was centralize it. Like, what if you could create a trust that could look after the properties, so take over the
Yeah.
trusteeship of the land and the chapels that were being built? And essentially, that was the origins of what we now have as stewardship. So it operated as a trust for around the first 50 or so years. Along the way, different more philanthropically minded Christians
Yeah.
became
Yeah.
involved where they wanted to give in certain ways, and so that introduced a whole other aspect to what stewardship did. And then I suppose the kind of couple of key milestones was sometime late 70s, early 80s. There was a recognition that this trust, which was really operating from within a solicitor's office,
Yeah.
could actually offer more to the church
Yeah.
if people focused on it full time.
Yeah.
And that's then when a number of people started to get involved, work more kind of in a part-time than full-time capacity to start to create something that is now closer to what we see as a stewardship. In parallel to that, there were others in other parts of the country, again, Christians, coming together to solve similar issues
Mm.
and creating other similar trusts to do with resourcing the
Right.
church. And so, come the probably the millennium, actually, it was the early 2000s. Two of those organizations merged. One was called Stewardship Services, one was called Sovereign Giving,
Okay.
merged
Yeah.
together to create what is now Stewardship. And then over the years that followed, a number of those other trusts
Yeah.
merged in. So that's kind of a bit of a
Yeah.
backstory. But
I
at the
love that.
core of what we do, there has always been this mission to resource the church
Yeah.
for the work that it's been called to do.
Yeah, I love that, and the fact that you've been there 18 years, you've probably experienced and seen a lot of changes in churches and the kind of help that they've needed in kind of resourcing.
Yeah, yeah, huge change. I mean, when I joined stewardship as well, we were a staff of 30, just over 30, um, delivering a range of services, some kind of practical financial type services to
Yeah,
churches, as well as some um, services to support Christians who wanted to give. Now,
yeah,
that's still really at our core. But what's changed a lot in those 18 years is we've obviously now moved so much into the digital space. So
yeah,
turning a lot of those services into digital tools has been a big
yeah,
focus for us, and also just scaling up. There's a lot of demand. I'm sure, as people listening will know, it's a thankless task
yeah. It is.
trying to do the
Yeah,
admin, the governance, the finance for a church or even a Christian charity. And so we find more and more our services
yeah,
are in
yeah.
increasing demand.
Yeah, I think every trustee that I speak to or operations person that's working in church is saying that governance is just getting more and more complicated, and you
Yeah,
you feel like you're volunteering for lots of people in these kind of roles,
yeah,
and you're trying to do the best you can, and actually to go to some places for some advice on the next steps that you need to take is just so helpful.
yeah,
And so many people may have on the podcast may have come across you before in what you guys do deliver, and it's great. And I just that's amazing how God's just blessed it, isn't he? From 30 staff to what you're saying, 115
yeah.
staff,
That's right.
is remarkable, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I love that grace at work in that. It's great.
It's been fantastic, and I have to say, Gavin, we have been so blessed with the people that come
Mm,
to work at Stewardship, particularly over this kind of last probably 10 years or so, as we've
yeah,
been more intentional about looking to grow. It's always that challenge with the work that we do. There's often a level of technical
yeah,
expertise that you
yeah,
need
yeah,
with some of the services that we provide, but what we also really clear on as we kind of assess each role is that there's an occupational requirement for people to have and practice the Christian faith themselves
yeah, yeah,
in order to maintain the the objects of
Yeah,
us
yeah,
as a
yeah,
charity, but
yeah, yeah,
also to be able
yeah,
to engage well and
yeah.
appropriately with all of those that we serve. So we really consider ourselves blessed when we kind of take a moment to look at some of the
Yeah.
kind of guys that we've got working for us at the moment. It's been a fantastic few years of development.
Yeah, it's great. I follow you guys on social media, and I often see you guys organizing these like team days, and
Yeah,
there always looks like there's some crazy fun, and yet there's this kind of gathering together of teams. So the culture stuff for you, really like from looking in from outside, go, oh wow, there's a really good culture in stewardship. Is that some of the stuff that you've brought to the organization?
I think it's something we've collectively
Okay,
brought. I mean, I joined even when I joined Stewardship 18 years ago. There was a really strong sense of culture, a really strong
yeah,
sense of purpose, and what we're trying to achieve as an organization. I think over various iterations of leadership teams, we've always been cognizant of how important it is to try and
yeah,
guard that culture. The last 2 years, we had a change 2 years ago with one of my colleagues at the time, Janie, who was our CFO, stepping up to become CEO, and that also marked the start of us embarking on a new strategy as well for the coming years. And part of that was also about how do we become the right type of organization for
mm,
what's coming next.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so we were really intentional also about investing in culture. And that's something that we've continued to work hard on. And that's very much about preserving. I mean, we very much, I think, see ourselves as stewards of this
yeah,
organization. It's
yeah,
120 years old.
yeah,
And so it's very much about how do we maintain all of the really important aspects that have gone into our culture
yeah,
already, and then
yeah,
how do we build on that? So we're
yeah,
actually having a year of culture at the moment. We've got 11 statements that we kind of working towards, which outline the
yeah,
type of culture that we have or aspire to have,
yeah.
and we're going through one of those each month at the moment. So
Yeah.
that's going to be a
I love that.
fun journey for us all in 26.
Yeah,
But um, those team days that we show online, crucially important.
yeah.
As we've grown, we've attracted staff from much further afield, so there's a lot of hybrid working still that
Okay.
we do, and so we've now got 3 touch points in the year where we
Yeah,
bring everyone together and we know we're going to have a day.
yeah,
Um, what we know about stewardship is we work really hard, and
yeah,
there's often quite a lot of kind of fast-paced work that happens at stewardship.
yeah,
And so we're really intentional about getting everyone together to have a day where we can say, right, let's now just
yeah,
raise our heads a bit. Let's spend some time together in fellowship, in worship. Let's have some fun as well. Let's build new relationships that we don't get the chance to do as well when you're doing
yeah,
that online. So yeah,
yeah,
that development of culture is a really integral
yeah.
component of what we're doing at the
What you're
moment.
doing. I love that. And just the fact that your job title's got purpose in it, that the
Yeah,
whole thing about, like, we talk to leaders a lot about just trying to understand their vision and their mission for their church, because everything sort of builds around that, doesn't it? And
yeah,
wanting to build on the history, wanting to to reach into a newest area or something like that, does take vision, and then it does take
yeah.
resource that kind of backs up that, doesn't it? And so just that connection to why we do stuff is brilliant. And yeah, I love that flavor that you guys have got there.
Yeah, and I think those components all have to work together. There's
Yeah,
times when you can have a really great culture, but if you're um if you've not got a clearer sense of the direction of where you're trying to
yeah,
head, you can have a great culture, but actually ultimately it starts to become dissatisfying
yeah,
when you're trying to then do your work. So I think all of those things have to to
yeah,
to, to play a part. 3 years ago, we spent the year working on the future of stewardship.
yeah,
And we did this across the whole organization. We invited staff to feed in. We had a group of, I think, somewhere around 30 or 40 contributors in the end, all feeding thoughts and ideas in to start to build a new strategy.
yeah,
And that was almost kind of going right the way back to basics. Who are we?
yeah, yeah,
What
yeah,
is what is stewardship here to do? How has stewardship been built to date? But what is it we're also being called to do now to serve the church, capital C,
yeah,
in
yeah,
a variety of ways? And I think doing that really helped us then get alignment. And the
yeah,
last two
yeah,
years, I've been really encouraged to see um, the progress that an organization can start to make when you've
Yeah,
got
yeah,
the
yeah,
mission, the vision, the culture, but
yeah,
also the operations and the plans
yeah,
to all start to line up. Then you really start to see some exciting things happen.
yeah.
And yeah, it's been a thrill to be a part of.
It's great, and I love the thinking, and yeah, totally agree. And when we go and kind of visit churches and help them think through some of these things of how do you get to an operational plan? Well, let's start working back. Let's start with your vision, and like you say,
Yeah,
we're thinking about culture, we're thinking about our strategy, our
that's right.
capacity, aligning our roles and our finances and our resources all around that vision is quite actually quite a powerful thing, isn't it? When you get that stuff aligned,
Mm,
it makes a massive difference in actually delivery and actually seeing fruit come about. And
yeah.
yeah,
And I think the key with that kind of mission and the vision and the values as well, the kind of
yeah,
how we operate, you those are vital because actually there's only so much planning you can do
yeah, yeah,
without becoming a very controlled organization as well. And part of what we've been looking to try and do is bring more empowerment across all levels of stewardship. And we're still on the journey,
yeah,
but but that's where the mission, the vision, the values comes in because
yeah,
if you can have confidence that the team around you kind of really understand those first
mm,
principles of why we're doing this, but also really understand the how.
yeah,
This
yeah,
is
yeah,
this is what it needs to look like.
yeah,
What you then do is you've created the space for people to then deviate off the plan if they need to,
yeah,
while still pursuing the strategy that
yeah,
they need
yeah.
to get to. And I think that's the sort of stuff we're starting to see now is right, that common purpose then really plays through. So
Yeah, no, it's great. And just where you link in with local churches, just most of the calls that we get at the church office are over capacity, where people are needing some extra support in, particularly in areas of like kind of financial areas, payrolls, things like that, where we've relied on, single treasurers for
yeah,
decades,
yeah,
that have been burnt out and just wrecked in many ways. We're starting to see teams of people that are going like, a finance team, and they're kind of breaking down the roles, but and getting more members involved. So this kind of every member ministry approach, we're starting to see more of, which is exciting in churches.
yeah,
And it's great to kind of that stewardship is there to kind of help with that little bit of capacity that you don't have.
yeah.
And so some of your services kind of lovely, fit in lovely to that and serve
Yeah.
churches.
Yeah,
And
we took, I mean, so in terms of some of the services we offer to church, you mentioned payroll. There's a good one. I mean, that the we offer a payroll bureau service where we essentially just uh, take that load away from
yeah, yeah,
a
yeah,
church or a Christian charity. They can kind of outsource the whole thing to us. We have a team that are just worrying about that
yeah,
all day, every month, every year on behalf of those
yeah,
clients. And we
yeah,
really kind of that's often how it's referred to is this is a service that ultimately takes away
yeah,
sleepless nights from
yeah,
church treasurers or church
yeah,
leaders because there's a good example of something that's got hugely complex in even
yeah,
the last 10, 15 years. The nature of reporting has changed, the additional requirements around kind of changes to contracts and reporting, um, things to do with auto enrollment,
yeah,
pensions.
yeah,
There's a huge amount now. It's no longer a case of just writing someone a check and saying, "There you go, off you
yeah,
go, you've been paid." And so that service again, is in huge demand. We're doing a big investment at the moment in
yeah,
the technology that powers that
yeah,
because we know that's something that we're going to need to scale, give treasurers better access to some of that information, etc. So yeah, there's huge demand, and that's really kind of what stewardship's about. Is
yeah,
um, how can we help serve churches often with good advice and guidance and
yeah,
information if they are able to do it themselves,
yeah,
but where they're not we could then come alongside
yeah,
a church and say, look, no worries, we've got this. We can guide you through it.
yeah.
Um, One of our most popular briefing papers is called "Help! I've lost my treasurer!" Exclamation mark. I think I haven't checked the stats recently, but that was always
Yeah,
kind of very high up on the list
yeah,
because
yeah,
it's exactly the situation you described, Gavin,
yeah,
that we see happen through churches up and down the land. That treasurer who has carried that burden for
yeah,
often quite a long time reaches a moment of retirement, says, I can't do this
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and where does that next volunteer come from? And
Yeah.
actually, the nature and the scope of that responsibility has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And I think people are increasingly time poor as well. So
Yeah.
unless
Yeah.
you already have an expertise in that area,
Mm.
it's actually become a more challenging role to volunteer to do in the first
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
So
No,
that's why
that's
we're here.
absolutely right. Yeah, and one of the things that we've noticed with churches, and you probably will be able to confirm this and talk around it, is that lots of charities and particularly churches that we relate to are moving to kind of new CIOs and are in the process of kind of changing over to that process, and in that process they're kind of uncovering like paperwork that's missing, and wrong trustees are on the wrong deeds, and they're not registered with the land registry, and
Yeah.
and all these things begin to be quite complex, and they haven't invested in this area for decades, probably two
Yeah.
decades for some that we've come
Yeah.
across.
Yeah.
And now they're shifting into a CIO. It's like they actually need some real specialist advice in the area of governance. And
Yeah.
I know you've got some technical people on that, haven't you, that are able to jump in and help with stuff like
So
that.
that's right. We've got one of the services that we offer is charity formation or conversion. So that's a whole piece of work that we offer. Um, and actually the same is true when people are just trying to get registered for the first time for
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
You know, it
yeah,
might be a kind of
yeah,
independent church they're wanting to get registered, or often a kind of parallel ministry running, kind of a community ministry running alongside the church that they want to operate separately. Um, that often you need that person with you asking
yeah,
sometimes challenging questions or probing questions to really understand what's this all about
yeah,
and to help you avoid those pitfalls. But we also see it regularly. We hear stories from our accounts examination team. So again, we've got then another team who are the accountants, and
yeah,
they're doing independent examination of accounts for churches and charities each year. Um, and they will often have those similar
yeah,
issues. You know, it's that
yeah,
point of conversion. We
yeah,
often find it's the point at which you choose to get your accounts examined by stewardship. That's another one of those
yeah, yeah,
inflection
yeah,
points where
yeah, yeah.
suddenly these guys who really know church and also are really, really detailed and diligent
Mm,
will then start to have a look and say, oh, have you thought about this? Have you thought about
yeah,
that? Or often again, payroll is one where
yeah,
the payroll team will have an initial conversation with the church. So how many on the payroll? Oh, there's
yeah.
just two. It's just me and them. And then you start to get into it. And well,
Mm,
we do pay someone to look after the grounds like once a week, and we do pay someone to help with the cleaning. And
yeah,
suddenly you're like, well,
yeah,
actually, you've probably got more like six or seven people
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
should be on your
yeah,
payroll,
yeah,
but then what do?
yeah,
And we very much don't want to leave people high and dry. So then it's
yeah,
okay, don't worry. Here's how we'll help get contracts in place. Here's how we'll help go through all of that. We'll sort the reporting with HMRC. We'll sort this. We'll sort that. We'll
yeah,
get you all on the straight and narrow. So
yeah,
you're absolutely right. There are those moments where suddenly you go, oh goodness,
yeah,
we've missed something here. Um, the goal, I think, and the priority is okay. You've missed something, but that's again where you need that additional help and support.
yeah,
There
yeah,
are people out there, people like us, people that other organizations as well that can then step in and say, "Don't worry,
yeah,
we've got this. We've seen this a number of times. You're not alone. We
yeah,
can work through this together."
yeah,
And then get you to a point where you can then just enjoy being the volunteer treasurer or whatever that role might
yeah.
be.
Absolutely right, and it does give confidence, doesn't it, to leaders? I know lots of leaders who have kind of lots of sleepless nights over some of the stuff around GDPR or
Yeah,
payroll or have we got the right policy and procedure in place that covers us? And these are things they're not experts in, but they know need to be done to a high level as best they can.
yeah,
And so some of it I find that people that relate to us, it's confidence building as well, isn't it? And just
hmm
going, okay, we've got some expertise or we've got some skills, but actually just having somebody else's eyes on it just give us a little bit more confidence. Say, yeah, okay, we're doing the right thing here.
yeah. And I think that's why we've also worked hard over the years to create content and resources that help answer some
Yeah,
of those questions that people have. I mean, actually, like I said, that popular briefing paper, "Help, I've Lost My Church Treasurer,"
yeah,
really
yeah,
comes as a response. Because I think also often those who are in the leadership position
Yeah.
didn't necessarily choose to be in the leadership position because they viewed themselves as the CEO of a small organization or a
Yeah.
medium-sized
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, often they form part of that spiritual leadership, and
Yeah.
that's often the thing that's come first. And so there's a lot of work often, I think, to be done with church leaders as well
Yeah.
to help upskill and increase the confidence to even know what the
Yeah.
questions are to ask. I mean, it wouldn't be uncommon, I think, to have a situation where the treasurer actually knows a lot,
Yeah.
and it's the church leader who just doesn't know what are the
Yeah.
questions I should be asking in order
Yeah.
to really understand how this works. Or actually, no, I'm just going to default to the treasurer. I'm just going to focus in on the
Yeah.
spiritual leadership.
Yeah.
But that's then the importance of having a whole board, a whole team, a
Yeah.
whole group of
Absolutely right.
trustees and other advisors around to be able to share that load of asking good questions
Yeah.
and hopefully getting good answers.
Absolutely right, and I think that's one of the takeaways. If you're listening to this and you're serving in one of these areas by yourself, then who else can you draw in as a bit of a team to come alongside you? And I think we know that to be effective, don't we? In terms of the
Yeah.
churches that I've seen, somebody on their own just delegated it to get on with it. Never works out as well as it does with a team approach, with people doing gift aid, people doing governance, people doing some of the day-to-day finance. Getting a group around you and working together is makes a big difference. So
Yeah.
back to that culture question, isn't it? Again, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
churches in these areas. Now some of the things that I've noticed over the years, just kind of interacting with stewardship, is you've had a lovely heart for church planters.
Hmm.
And we've seen some material that you put together, and sometimes you've had policy packs and stuff like that to help churches getting started. And you talked about new CIOs and getting off the ground. Is that kind of a theme that's at the heart of your kind of leadership team? Are you always thinking about, yes, getting behind new churches and new starts?
I think so. That's not a stated part of our strategy, but certainly I think all of
Yeah,
the members of our leadership team would be very kind of enthused um, by that. I think what we recognized as we did the strategy is that it's probably a little bit broader in terms of what we would say that
yeah,
we support. So really what we recognized was that a lot of what stewardship offers, the value that we offer, is really being able to provide infrastructure
mhm.
to Christian ministry that actually lacks infrastructure or
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
have it. So
yeah,
that's where the
yeah,
church
yeah,
plants fits,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Often
yeah,
it might be a kind of a couple that have got a vision to kind of move into a new space, new area, start up a new ministry, whatever that might be. Um, that really lack any other infrastructure. And of course, in the early stages of church planting, you really want to be investing in building the
yeah,
church, doing the
yeah,
ministry of the church. And so that's where we recognize actually, yeah, that's what we can offer to church plants
yeah,
is let's help them with infrastructure that they wouldn't ordinarily
yeah,
have.
yeah,
Let's make it easy for them to access the stewardship platform for donations, for example,
yeah,
so that they could just invite everyone that's coming into the church to do all of their giving on the stewardship platform, and then it just takes away all of that thinking around processing payments,
yeah,
dealing with gift aid, etc., etc. But then let's pair that with all of the other governance things, the policies, the templates. Yeah,
yeah,
as they get to a point where they might want to employ staff, we can come alongside them for that. And
yeah,
actually, if you follow that story through to completion with church plants, often where it leads to is right, we've now reached a certain scale that we're going to need to start to look at how we grow more
yeah,
intentionally. We might
yeah,
need a building, and
yeah,
then we're able to come alongside churches for loans to help them
yeah, yeah,
accomplish that as well. So, yeah, so church plants is definitely a passion, but you could apply that same principle to
yeah. You could.
individuals doing ministry, for example, who get themselves signed up on the stewardship platform to raise their support, knowing that we then have got the
Yeah,
kind of umbrella infrastructure around them for donation processing. We've done the eligibility checks to confirm that
yeah,
they can raise funds for the work that they've been called to do, for
yeah,
example. So I would say that plus small charities, small Christian charities,
yeah,
is really where we've been more intentional about
yeah,
applying our
yeah,
focus. And
yeah,
then the next few years is very much how can we really help strengthen um, that. So yeah,
yeah.
that's a big motivator for us.
Yeah, that's good. And something that you guys have done quite regularly is the research around giving and your generosity report. tell us a little bit about how that has kind of come about, and you know,
Yeah.
and the benefits for people to kind of really engage with that. Yeah.
Well, this, I suppose, in one sense, this is where the two parts of stewardship meet. So,
Mm.
we've talked a lot about the services we provide to churches, but if you look on our annual report, for example, you go to Charity Commission, you'll see
Mm.
a huge amount of money comes into stewardship as well, and
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
other half of what we do, where
yeah,
we're operating as what would kind of comes under the banner of a donor advised fund from the
yeah,
kind of legal standpoint, and that's where we're helping somewhere in the region of about 60,000 Christians give generously each year.
yeah,
That breaks down into a variety of ways in which people give. So there's a very small group of clients that we work with who are giving large amounts. They're
mhm,
using stewardship instead of a charitable trust.
yeah,
And then it goes right the way through to people who are using our giving account on their phone to
yeah,
self-manage their
yeah,
charitable giving,
yeah,
to pay in each month, distribute that out. And we're in the middle dealing with the gift aid, helping them get the tax back that they might need from a tax return,
yeah,
helping them make non-cash gifts, gifts of shares, legacy giving, etc. We're doing
yeah,
all of that. And the generosity report kind of comes out of that, as well as the support we're doing to the
yeah, yeah,
church.
yeah,
So we essentially asked the question a couple of years ago, like what is stewardship here to do? And one of the ways we articulated that was, we described it as closing the giving gap.
yeah,
So we essentially said, look, roughly how much is given per year by Christians, we kind of assume by Christians, to
yeah.
churches and Christian charities. And when you have a look, it's around £2 billion per year.
Wow.
Massive,
Yeah,
significant, right? Enough to
yeah,
show up on a kind of government department's budget, right? It's a
yeah, yeah,
sizable amount. But we then did a bit of a back of the envelope calculation and said, well, look, let's take a kind of reasonable estimate as to how many Christians there are in the UK at the moment,
yeah,
and let's assume those Christians are earning just the average income.
yeah.
Like we actually know from studies that Christians typically earn more. So on
Yeah,
balance, we think it would be higher, but let's just take that average amount
yeah,
that's in the region of about 30,000. And let's just assume that everyone just straight tithes that at 10%. So
yeah.
we won't go into a big debate about tithing right now, but we said let's
Yeah.
just use that. It seems like a sensible benchmark
Yeah,
to kind of
yeah,
go for, right?
yeah,
Let's just say 10% of that is given. Now, when we do that calculation, we get to £7 billion.
yeah,
So we're like, there's a giving gap. Like
yeah,
whichever way you kind of look at it and cut it, we're like, Christians currently are giving £2 billion. We think there's a giving
yeah.
gap of about
Yeah.
5 billion. But the truth is, as we did that, it was back of an envelope, and we said, we don't actually know how much Christians give, nor
Mm,
do we know why they give, what motivates them to give. And so we felt that was the question that needed to be answered,
yeah,
and we were the organization that it was relevant most to. So let's
yeah,
set about answering that question. So yeah,
yeah,
we've done this generosity report. This is the third year. Will be the results will be out, I think, by the time people are watching and
yeah,
listening to this. Available freely to just download from the stewardship website. And that's been really interesting to try and get under the skin
mm,
of why people give, how much they're giving, what they choose to give to, the
yeah,
relationships they have with different causes, charities versus church, etc., etc.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We do a breakdown by denomination as well
Yeah,
to
that's
kind of give a
helpful.
sense of where giving, what giving looks like there. And it's been, I think, a real value. It's something that is really useful in the space of generosity. It's
Yeah,
giving us better ideas as to the sorts of resources we might need to create to then help
mm,
Christians explore generosity, explore
yeah,
giving.
yeah,
And we do that knowing that we hope and anticipate that the church and Christian charities will then be the beneficiaries of that, and it will
yeah,
lead to an increase of resource that flows in to those churches and
yeah,
to Christian charities. And then from the results as well, it's giving, I think, more visibility to churches, to church
yeah,
leaders, senior church leaders as well, to really start to think through how well are we doing
yeah,
as a church
yeah,
body in teaching about this, in preaching about this, in
yeah,
discipling people in the principles of biblical stewardship, of which generosity and giving is a kind of
yeah,
key
yeah, yeah.
component.
Absolutely right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
it's
I
been fun.
found the report really interesting. Yeah, some of the stuff that was around, like how often would you talk to another church member or a friend about your giving?
Yeah.
and you just look at some of that and you think, oh yeah, when was the last time I had a conversation about that? And then just the reasons why you give, and
Yeah.
just thinking about that, it was, yeah, it's fascinating because it's with all the digital giving that happens now and all the standing orders and things like that, it's sort of taken away from the kind of Sunday morning service to some extent, where you would have passed the basket round and
Yeah.
you'd be always talking about something, to really maybe one giving message a year, or one giving day, that's the
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so it is an interesting thing. And I do find it interesting. Like, I will sit and look at our church and look at the kind of the different demographics and how they give, and how does some of the cultural things that are going on impact, the giving that we've seen.
Yeah.
And those who, started the church 30 years ago to those who have joined now, like, the differences in that. And I think it's fascinating to kind of, read through it and be kind of spurred on to think about your own context and think, actually, yeah, what is our church like at this? What are we
Yeah.
like at this as a
Yeah.
leadership team? So yeah,
Exactly right,
fascinating.
and that's exactly one of the reasons that we wanted to kind of put this research out into people's hands. We spend a lot of time doing the research well, but we also spend just as much time constructing the final
Mm,
report with a whole load of recommendations in there as
yeah,
well, and kind of references to other resources and materials. And like I said, so far it's been really well received. I mean, the second report, we had a headline in there which was that younger Christians were the most generous,
yeah,
and that
yeah,
really kind of
yeah,
created a lot of discussion. Is probably
yeah,
the best way to describe it. At the start of last year, people saying, "I don't see it, I don't see it." And then the Quiet Revival report from the Bible
yeah,
Society
yeah,
came out, which
yeah,
was saying
absolutely right.
young people are coming back into the church, and so we've developed more of those themes. We've looked at that in a bit more detail at the moment. The report that will be live, our third report. Um, Really interesting stuff that we're finding around how people talk about giving. We've found the real importance of the influence that a church leader or some other type of mentor, that might, I guess, be a small group or a home group
Yeah, yeah,
leader, but
yeah,
someone in more of that kind of mentoring role, the significant impact
yeah,
that someone like that has in encouraging people to give. And we typically find those who are most generous are people that can really recall
yeah,
having that type of interaction and conversation
yeah,
with someone
yeah,
external to them and their kind of family unit.
yeah,
But what also surprised us was um, when you look at how frequently those conversations happen, the minute you get past about the age of 25, they
mm,
stop. The
mm,
most common answer is never. So there's
yeah,
also
yeah,
something culturally that happens. I guess
yeah,
life happens. You
yeah,
you kind of start to focus potentially more in career or family or whatever. You those social networks change a bit. Some of the interactions at church change, but suddenly you go from a space often where people are quite happy to talk about things they're passionate about, things they want to give to, how they feel about their giving, how they feel about their approach to finance,
yeah,
to then
yeah,
just not having those conversations. So
yeah,
we've been challenged by that, for example, and
yeah,
and that prompts the question for us, well, what can we do to support church leaders
yeah,
to make sure that there are cultures of giving?
yeah,
And interestingly, um, you there's this really interesting kind of paradox that happens. So we asked the question, um, kind of how much would you like to hear about teaching or
yeah,
giving or finance more broadly in church? How much would you like to hear it preached and taught about? And the response levels are pretty high across the board,
okay,
across different
yeah,
categories. Then you say, well, how often do you currently get it?
yeah, yeah,
Really,
yeah,
really low.
yeah,
And so that's prompted another parallel project that we're
yeah,
working on at the moment. We've called it the Generous Churches Project. But essentially, we're trying to understand what is it that stops a church
yeah,
leader from feeling confident and comfortable and competent to
yeah,
stand in front of the church and deliver really good teaching and preaching on
yeah,
finance,
yeah, yeah,
money, stewardship, and giving.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. It does, and I think, just our team just having a look at it, it raises questions for us about how we do membership, and
yeah,
so how important some of those points, those touch points are, where we actually talk about giving and serving, and how, what do we think is an acceptable amount to give? How many evenings a week would you give to the church, or what
Yeah.
levels of funds can you support the church in?
Yeah.
And just having, just rethinking that, because I think what's changed for us culturally, and you mentioned about the quiet revival, Sunday morning, we've got more and more people turning up just out of the blue. So
Yep.
they're not coming through a Christianity Explored or an Alpha
Yep.
anymore.
Yep.
Those seem to come secondary. Like the Sunday morning is the most evangelistic opportunity to do it. And so we got people coming and serving and joining who aren't members, but they've embedded themselves in the community already.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I thought the membership was going to be a step that people take, but now it's all a complete mess.
I think that's right. I
you
think
know,
that's right. And I
yeah,
think that's exactly what I think the Quiet Revival shared, and certainly some of the rooms I've been in, kind of with the discussions, veering more towards what does discipleship look like
yeah,
rather than what does evangelism look like? Because
yeah, yeah,
what you described is exactly what I would say I see when I'm at St. Michael's on a Sunday. So
yeah,
St. Michael's is, like I said, it's conservative evangelical um, Anglican church. So and it has the most prominent place in all of the town, right? So
yeah,
it's kind of
yeah,
right on the fringe of town. So if you asked anyone in Braintree describe a church, they probably describe that
yeah, yeah,
one. So
yeah,
it's got high
yeah,
visibility, and it is incredibly common to see that situation unfold on a Sunday.
mm,
And it
mm,
usually goes something along the lines of, I've been reading my Bible. I think I've kind of become a Christian, so I
yeah,
thought I should come to church now.
yeah,
Or I've been watching YouTube and I kind of believe this stuff, so I think I should come to church now.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
everything's been flipped.
yeah,
But then the thing is, well, but what is it? Kind of what's your starting point, and then what's the journey we now need to go on
yeah,
to then really help you um, kind of understand and explore the Christian faith in all of its fullness,
yeah, yeah,
and almost kind of close that gap
yeah,
between what sometimes happens when someone's kind of on the fringes of church, not quite sure what they believe, but they spent a bit
mm,
of time listening to some teaching, to now, no, I kind of believe this. Oh, okay, right.
yeah, yeah,
Now let's close the gap. Let's talk about more about what Jesus said about this, about this, about this, about this.
yeah,
So I think it's very much around how do we disciple. Therefore, how do you equip church
yeah,
leaders
yeah,
again to do that in a slightly different way?
yeah,
Not all of it fits easily in a kind of pulpit or from the
yeah,
front. So what do you do with your small group stuff? What do you do with the kind of anything you do around membership?
yeah,
Like as someone's thinking about becoming part of the church, what's the course you want to guide them
yeah,
through, for example? So
yeah. Yeah, I
yeah,
think it's
interesting
good.
times.
It is very interesting, and I think it's just like you say, just helping to equip leaders. Often you just are at your church and you only see your church, and so the
Yeah,
ability to interact with stewardship or the church office or something gives you that opportunity to have someone from outside have a look in and
yeah,
just be able to suggest some different ways of thinking, different ways of doing it, who have got experience of working. You guys are working with hundreds, if not thousands, of churches
yeah.
that you're learning, aren't you? And you're modeling and you're building up
That's
knowledge
right.
and resource that actually you could be a real blessing to the church.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
and
it's
and you're
exciting.
absolutely right. And I think we're often we're in the middle of quite a lot of those interesting conversations because we're serving across
Yeah,
so many different denominations and networks. So we
yeah,
really do see the kind of full
yeah,
breadth of what the church looks like in the UK, and can then start to look at the relative strengths and kind of
yeah,
weaknesses of each. And hopefully there's a role I think we can play in that kind of networking and connecting and sharing of ideas. And I think, yeah, the generosity report is certainly one of the more public
yeah,
ways in which we've been able to
yeah,
to do that,
yeah,
and hopefully be a helpful voice into what we think is an important conversation at the moment.
yeah. Daniel, well, mate, it's so good to hear about it. And yeah, if you're listening to the podcast and you're in need, you feel that pressure point and you feel like capacity is limited, and there's ways that you can buy some time. Just a payroll could save you 2 hours. You may think, right, yeah, we can do this. We've got someone in our church who can do this, but to buy a little bit of capacity just to help you, the financial examination. So have a look at their services. Go and check out their website and link in. And it's great to hear from Daniel, just that heart for what you're trying to do. And people love to capture that, don't they? The why
Mm.
question really matters, doesn't it, when
Yeah,
we engage with services? And so lovely to hear stewardship's heart to serve the church and to serve leaders and more broadly as well with Christian charities. So What's the split, Daniel, on churches and charities? Have you ever got a gauge on how much you're
In
working
terms of
with?
who we're supporting,
Yeah,
I mean, it's such a challenging question to answer. So we have on the database, kind of using our giving platform,
yeah,
we have around I think about 6,000 churches and Christian charities
great.
that we have registered with us using the platform. In addition, we've got another 2,500 individuals doing Christian
Yeah,
ministry who are using that
brilliant.
platform. But then when you look at the adoption and take up of our other services,
Yeah,
there's at least another probably couple of thousand churches that we are
wow.
delivering either some type of support, content, and training to.
Yeah,
We're delivering services directly to, so payroll, accounts examination I mentioned already,
yeah,
or helping get those charities kind of registered or converted in the first place. And then there's things like I said, the lending as well. So we've got a
yeah,
portfolio of different churches up and down the country, large and small, that we're working on kind of loans or lending
yeah,
to help them build, rebuild, find new locations. So
great.
it's a real kind of wonderful spread that
Yeah.
we're really privileged to be a part of.
Yeah, well, it's great. Well, please pass on our thanks, and yeah, look forward to kind of working alongside you guys in whatever way we can to support churches. So yeah, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, my friend. Really appreciate your time
Good to be
and your
here, Gavin.
conversation. It's
Good to
great.
be here. Thanks so much.
And just before we finish, just want to do a quick shout out to Church Suite, who have got behind the podcast, who've been supporting us in putting together a good church management course that's now available online to support people in that role in administration operations. If you're involved as a trustee, maybe in some way in managing the church, then this course might be something that might be useful. So we're grateful for Church Suite for their sponsorship of the podcast, for their work that they're doing to help us on the Good Church Management course. We really appreciate it. So do get in touch if you've got any questions. If anything, we can link you up to Stewardship and their services. If there's anything that we can do to get behind you as the church office, then we'd love to hear from you. So please get in touch at questions@thechurchoffice.co.uk. And yeah, we'd love to engage with you. So thank you for listening to the podcast. Daniel, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Gavin.
Goodbye, everyone.